In the last video, I soldered this Mega 328 PB onto this little carrier board. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to solder the pin header onto this chip, and I'm going to show you how to solder properly to do this. And I'm going to use a standard 1.6 millimeter chisel tip. It's the tip that I use for almost everything. And I'm going to use my MG Chemical solder. This is just a standard old solder. This is the 4884227G that I always use. And I'm going to use this Kester 186 liquid flux. Use liquid flux. It will make your life so much easier. One of the things that professionals do is they clean. Everything needs to be clean. I've already cleaned this board with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to clean my solder because you're removing the corrosion from the solder. So you can see I've removed a little bit of corrosion from the solder. That will make it easier to solder with. So clean your solder. It only takes a minute. And then clean your tip and tin your tip to keep it healthy. Right, and I'm just going to shake the excess solder off. So there, we're tinned, we're good to go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some liquid flux on this. And the liquid flux is really important to the process. It makes life so much easier if you have flux on the joints that you're trying to solder. And you can put lots on. Lots and lots and lots. All right. Well, I didn't do a very good job of getting that fluxed. All right, so flux all of this. Get it fluxed. Flux on there. It makes the solder flow better. All right, so what we want to do when we're soldering is we want to heat, apply solder, and then remove the soldering iron. So I'm going to do this. Get my solder in here. All right, so we're going to heat the pad and the pin at the same time. That's important. You want heat everywhere. And you'll notice that I've got my soldering iron on one side of the pin and the pad, and I've got my solder on the other. That way, the pin and the pad are hot enough to melt the solder when the solder melts, so it will flow properly. So I'm going to heat the pin and the pad, come in with my solder, and apply solder. That's how you make a good joint. It's nicely filleted. There isn't too much. There isn't too little. You maybe use just a little bit more on there. Let's do another one. So you see that we're coming in and we're heating the pad and the pin, and we're touching the solder to it. We're making sure we get a good flow. We're getting a nice fillet. That's how you solder. And so we can just keep doing that as we go down this line. Heat, bring the solder in, heat, bring the solder in. Now I've done, 2, 4, 6, 7 there. I'm going to go out and I'm going to clean my tip. I'm going to reapply solder to my tip here, both sides, so that it doesn't corrode. And then we'll just continue down the line. So we can go over to the other side here and heat the pad and the pin, just like that. And that's really important. You want to get a nice fillet. So you want to get a nice curve so that the solder comes up off the pad and onto the pin like you see there. Heating the opposite side and making sure I'm making good contact with the pin and the pad so that I get good melting. So we'll just continue down here, heating the pin and the pad and applying the solder, and you get into a rhythm, and it just goes very quickly as you do this. And you want to make sure that you have a nice, shiny, smooth curve out of the pad into the pin. And that's where the flux helps you. The flux really makes the solder flow nicely. Then we'll go back down and finish the other side here. I got to clean my iron again. Now, if we were doing aerospace soldering, we would clean our soldering iron every time we do one of these, but we're not doing aerospace here. We're doing a Mega 328 PB on a carrier board. So we'll just continue down there, applying solder, applying solder. There we go. All right, so that's done. Those are all nicely filleted. Now, we're getting there. We're almost done. The next thing that we need to do is we need to clean those joints. So here we come in with some isopropyl alcohol. You guys have seen me do this before if you've watched a couple of those other videos that I've posted. Just put some isopropyl alcohol in there. Come in with the brush and give it a scrub. And this is just going to loosen up the flux and make it easier for us to get rid of it. a nice scrub. And then grab a Kim wipe and come in with the Kim wipe and dab it off. You guys are getting shaken by my doing that, aren't you? All right, so there we go. So we've got it soldered on now. We've got the header strip soldered on. We've got the chip soldered on there. And we've got nice shiny fillets. And those fillets may be a little bit light. I don't do a really heavy fillet, but those are good joints. And by the way, I'm using a Hakko soldering station here, and I've got it set for 400C, which I think is just a little over 750 F, but just a standard soldering iron. So that's what it looks like to solder a header strip. Make sure that you heat the pin and the pad and apply the solder from the other side, and use lots of liquid flux. Liquid flux is important.